I think what all of these historic global thought leaders have got in common is that they've unlocked understanding. That's why the book's called Key to the Door. They've unlocked our understanding through a really simple idea. I describe it as it's something, it's new, but it's not new. It's something that's been there, but we haven't really been able to access. It's an understanding that's been just out of reach. So they haven't conjured up something out of nowhere, but they've given us the key that's unlocked this door, this little simple idea. And it's usually because they're using some new language to help us get there. And by unlocking this door, we now go, oh yeah, I get it now. Okay. And that's the real magic of it. It's not that it's so profound, so epic that we hadn't even considered it before. It's been there just on the edge of our understanding. Vulnerability is the key to the door.
Welcome to the Success Consultancy's Just Great People podcast, the podcast that introduces you to ordinary people who've done extraordinary things. My name is Barry Eustance, and I'd like to introduce you to today's guest. Hi, everybody. It's Barry Eustance here again from the Success Consultancy's Just Great People podcast, joined again by Simon Hartley from Be World Class. We're going to talk today about Simon's book, Key to the Door, that I've read and reviewed. And I said, as someone who works closely with leaders, founders and ambitious teams, I read many books on leadership, performance and mindset. Key to the Door stands out by some distance. Simon Hartley has written something rare here, a book that is both profoundly simple and deeply impactful. Simon, welcome to the Just Great People podcast. And what a great book.
Thank you very much. It's lovely to be back.
So tell me, A, what sparked the book, and B, for our dear listeners and viewers, the thrust of the book, because I could take them through it, but it's your book, and what a great opportunity to hear it from the horse's mouth.
Yeah, well, the spark was a combination of two things that I've learned are pretty powerful ingredients when combined. One was curiosity, and I had this sort of burning question in my head: why them? And by that I mean, why did Simon Sinek, Brené Brown, James Clear, Seth Godin become global sort of thought-leading celebrities? The thousands and thousands of people who have also got great ideas and insights haven't. What is it about them? And so that part of it was curiosity, but part of it was frustration, because I was sitting there thinking, I think I've got some good ideas. I think I've got some insights that are worth listening to. And I was sort of reflecting on the fact that when I share mine, and there's a sort of a little polite ripple of applause in the background, but when they share theirs, there's a global standing ovation. And I'm thinking, but some of theirs aren't that profound. So back to the question, why them? What makes them so special? And I wanted to really get under the skin of global thought leadership, understand why some of those ideas seem to resonate kind of around the world, and others, yeah, they make sense and people get benefit from them, but they don't really have the same impact.
Yeah. And it's a pretty stellar bunch. Simon Sinek, Brené Brown, Tony Robbins, James Clear, Seth Godin, Tim Ferriss, Stephen Bartlett. He knows a thing or two about podcasts, I should say. Jim Rohn, Stephen Covey, Dale Carnegie, who knew a thing about a lot of things.
Yeah.
And Socrates. What a list.
Yeah. Well, I deliberately didn't want to just take the sort of the digital age here.
Yeah.
Because I'm thinking there are things that Stephen Covey did, and indeed Socrates, that probably are reflected in modern thought leaders. You know, there's some fundamental principles here that cross generations, centuries, millennia, in fact. Yeah. So I wanted to understand those as well.
And as I sit here in the corner asking the stupid questions, why don't we start with Socrates? Because that's a pretty good historical backdrop, isn't it, to kind of the whole thinking. And when you actually go back through sort of 70-year cycles of generations, he's actually not that far down the time tunnel in terms of number of people between us and him. So what's the story there, and how does it hook into the Key to the Door?
Socrates had a fairly modest starting point, which is usual. Whenever I find world-class performers in any field, never mind thought leadership, in any field, they tend to have modest start points. They tend to be what you describe as ordinary people. Socrates was exactly that. He was a fairly kind of middle-of-the-road, middle-class Athenian. He came from a very middle-class background. there was nothing that made him stand out. He didn't have any, any privileges in that respect. Um, but what he did have, he had the ear of some very influential people, and his ideas seemed to resonate with them. So they provided the platform for him. And these were sort of Athenian aristocracy. In his own right, Socrates didn't have the ability to just stand on a stage and have people listen to him. But the aristocracy, the young aristocrats in Athens who liked his ideas, who agreed with his ideas, gave him the stage and essentially, created a crowd for him and said, this guy's worth listening to. And that's really what sort of sparked Socrates' journey.
But
Without that,
how did he get into that position of influence? What was his key to the door there?
well, I think like most of us, he will come across people who could be highly influential. Whether he influences them or not is a completely different story. He was in and around Athenian society. There were a couple of Athenian institutions, the military being one of them, and there was a sort of political institution as well. So he was in those circles, like many of us are, but he was just saying things that made sense to these people. They stopped and they listened. And there were a small group of them who stopped and listened to start with, but that gave him the opening to, that stage to stand on, so that more people would stop and listen, and then more people again would stop and listen. And I was thinking about how this links with Malcolm Gladwell's idea of having a tipping point, having a critical mass of people. Once you get that critical mass of people that know you and know about your ideas, there's a very good chance that that critical mass could become a social epidemic. And now the vast majority of people know.
Yeah.
I mean, I was also reflecting on how people come into my sort of sphere, into my vision. And you may have heard there's a fella called Alex Hormozy, who's making waves at the moment. And he's been on a lot of people's radar for a long time. He's just appeared on mine. So, I'm not one of those early adopters. I'm at the other end of the curve, the back end of the curve. But eventually those ripples have reached me.
Yeah.
And I'm aware of who he is now. And a lot of people kind of look at me and go, you're late catching on, aren't you? And I'll sort of nod along and think, well, yeah, because I don't spend that much time online or on social media. It's not really my thing. But eventually his name has reached my ears. And that's part of that kind of wave, that social epidemic wave, the critical mass. I didn't hear about him from him. I heard about him from people who were talking about him.
Yeah. And the interesting thing is, isn't it, that when you go through that list of the people, the great luminaries in the book, the likes of Tony Robbins and Stephen Bartlett, the people that will reflect Simon Sinek, you reflect on their failures or apparent failures and their persistence that it's not just walking through the door and going, here I am. It's this slow build of tap, 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 isn't it? That gradually builds, the audience gradually builds the message, which I found fascinating. There is the assumptions that these people just appeared sort of like gods on the stage, the world stage, but they didn't.
No, absolutely. It's the irony of an overnight success. It doesn't happen overnight. And you're right. Whoever's backstory you look into, when we see them appearing, that is the tip of the iceberg. When you dig into the backstory, you see the rest of the iceberg. You see the fact that Brene Brown had published and self-published books beforehand that had gone nowhere before the big one, quote unquote. Even if you look back into Stephen Covey and Dale Carnegie's backgrounds, they've had failures and misfires first, all of them. James Clear, he was experimenting with things, trying to find something that might work, and eventually found something that worked. But it took him years to get there. And in his case, sort of, thousands of dollars in missed investments and things that never returned. But actually, if you think about most people who make it in life at some level, they've all got that in their backstory.
Well, the essence of success is failure, isn't it? In that looking at Ronaldo, I watched an interesting documentary on Ronaldo and the genius that is Ronaldo, and it ties up with musicians as well, the great musicians who aren't necessarily gifted per se. They're just really persistent. When everybody is around in the pub drinking beer, they're around the back practicing consistently and learning and failing and learning and failing and learning and failing and they practice and practice and practice until they get it right. And then, as I said in a recent podcast, they practice until they can't get it wrong. And when they do get it wrong, they do something about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that learning element of it. Years ago, somebody said to me, experience is a great teacher. And I stopped and I thought, it isn't though in its own right, is it? Because the experience is passive.
Yeah.
The learning is active. So you actively have to learn from the experience for it to be a teacher. And it's the same with, age doesn't give you wisdom, but
No.
if you continually reflect as you grow older, you may get wiser. But the reflection's another active process.
And the purpose that gives you, I think you really hit upon a theme there where age doesn't confer wisdom, but continual personal development creates the purpose that is so critical in human life, isn't it? The Henry Scarlett Spaces model, self-esteem and purpose are the S and the P of spaces, and autonomy, and that purpose being driven by learning and engagement and the quest for knowledge and the quest for personal growth, I think, is so powerful and so underrated, and for a lot of people largely ignored. I think we see a lot of people who don't actually, who just kind of prefer to kind of wither on the vine without sucking that essential juice of learning into the system.
Yeah. And again, if you dig into the backstories of these people particularly, you'll find that a lot of them went on their own very, very deliberate journey of personal development, and they sought out the development that they were looking for. I mean, Tony Robbins is one who sort of strikes me to start with, because he deliberately went and found Jim Rohn, and he, if you read into his story, he did that at a point in his life where I think he was something like $45 was the ticket cost to go and see Jim Rohn. And that wasn't something he could just reach into his pocket and find.
Yeah.
That was a lot of money to him at the time. But he decided that was going to be a worthwhile investment. And after going to see Jim Rohn, he also then said, "Can I be your apprentice? I want to learn from you." And after he'd learned what he needed to do, and here's the big thing, he then went and did it, even though it was massively uncomfortable. And if you think about how he built his business, he did it by creating a nationwide, US-wide road trip for himself, where he would spend a week in a city. He'd deliver a seminar on a weekend, and he'd spend the week being on radio shows, putting leaflets and flyers in windows, drumming up his audience to then deliver a seminar on the weekend, and they'd jump straight in his van, drive to another city and do the same thing the week after. And actually, as a methodology, if you wanted to build an audience of millions, that's not a bad way to do it. I mean, it's a hard way to do it, but it's a really good way to do it.
It's what the music business does, isn't it? I mean, they get in the tour bus and off they go. And
but he was doing all of his own PR as well. He was doing all of the legwork. He was learning the whole thing the hard way, but actually a very, very effective way. If you look at Jay Shetty, who on many levels I'm not a great fan of, but there's a couple of things I do admire about him. My friend Thomas, who wrote the foreword for Key to the Door, gave Jay a piece of advice. His advice was, go and create a video a day and post a video a day for 3 years. And it's going to be 1,000 videos, and you're not going to earn a penny in the meantime from these videos. You want to build up an audience of about 1 million, and then you can start to monetize it. So for 3 years, Jay Shetty created and posted a video a day, and he did it with a filmmaker. They were living on people's couches and sleeping on people's floors and things like that for 3 years to create and post these videos in order for him then to build his business on the back of. And, that, as Thomas says, he's given that advice to hundreds and hundreds of people, and only a tiny fraction, literally 2 or 3 people have ever done what he said. But both of the people that he talked to me about, Jay and his son, both of them have become massively successful.
Yeah. And it's back to the Pareto principle, isn't it? The sort of the 20% of the 20% of the 20%, you're down to sort of 0.64% of your total audience is going to generate 50% of your views or income or whatever. But it's the power of persistence, and also actually having the ability to pivot and actually learn as you go along, so that you are refining the delivery and the product. I mean, I found it absolutely fascinating. It's interesting again that you nudged into the discomfort element. of Tony Robbins. And at the back of Key to the Door is your This Is Mental challenge. And which, as you know, I have followed fully the video production. But can you explain that? Because it may not, it's a bit of a sort of, it's the play on words, isn't it? Because it's a bit of an English expression, a bit of a British expression. This is mental. And for those who may be listening outside of the UK, perhaps you could put it in context and explain actually what happened, because I think this is a really fascinating story.
Yeah, so the phrase "this is mental" can be used in a couple of ways. This is mental can be used to think, "Oh my God, this is crazy. Are you mental for taking this on? This is a ridiculous challenge." And that is one element of this, because we are asking, I call them our intrepid adventurers, those journeys that we're going to follow, to take on a really, really big challenge. But also, if we kind of dig under the surface, there may be a physical element to the challenge, but really the essence of the challenge is a mental challenge. It's overcoming the challenges that usually kick off between our ears. So if we think about it on those two levels, the whole thing is mental. Hence
Yes,
the title,
exactly.
"This is Mental."
Yeah.
And for our pilot series, we had two intrepid adventurers, Tony, who I know that you know, and Nick. And both of them have achieved incredible things in their lives. Tony played rugby for England and the British and Irish Lions, and then went on to fly A380s after flying with you at Virgin, I believe.
Yeah, Tony Underwood, folks, we're talking about the great Tony Underwood and British and Irish Lions player. And sorry,
Yeah.
Simon.
So, yeah, has achieved incredible things. Nick was world champion open water swimmer, and both of them had the same challenge, which I didn't realize when they sort of put their hands up and said, I've got a challenge I'd like to take on in 90 days.
Now you need to pause there for dear listener.
Hmm.
Before Simon does the big reveal, just have a little think. You've got an ex-captain who played international rugby and a world-class world champion open water swimmer. What is their big challenge going to be? The one that they're really focusing on. Little pause for thought. Have a think. We'll give you about 1 second until Simon gives you the answer, but it may surprise you. Simon,
Yeah,
over to you.
to tee it up, I mean, I throwed the doors open on this and said, do you want to climb mountains? Do you want to swim across oceans? Do you want to row across oceans? I'd actually said, do you want to fly a plane? But of course, for Tony, that's not a particular challenge. He's done that one already.
It was for me.
Or jump out of a plane or whatever. And both of them had the same challenge, which was public speaking, to speak on stage in front of an audience. That's the one that made the hairs on the back of their necks stand up and made their legs turn to jelly. And I was intrigued by that, because when I said to them, climbing a mountain, they sort of went, "No, we can do that.
We could run up a mountain."
Yeah, I mean, that's not, crossing an ocean. Nick's like, "Oh, I'm an open water swimmer. I can swim on oceans." So yeah, I was absolutely fascinated by the fact that was their big challenge. But when I stepped back from it, I thought, well, actually, they're not alone, are they? That would be many people's challenge. That would be
mine included. Mine included. For all the reasons that we were discussing earlier on. It plays into all of the big fears, isn't it? The 2 million year old brain that's sitting in here. All the fears are there, and people would fear public speaking more than dying. How does that work?
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, when you dig under the surface of that, you start to talk about things like imposter syndrome, the fear of being judged, the fear of failing, all of those sorts of things, and how people's self-worth is tied into that. And actually, it's a fear that operates on the level of identity. It's our identity that's under threat. It's how we see ourselves that's under threat. It's feeling like a failure. That's the thing that we're really scared of, isn't it? Feeling like we're a failure, or we're irrelevant, or that people are laughing at us behind our back, or whatever it is. Or to our face, maybe.
And yet, 'tis said that the audience almost invariably want you to succeed and aren't going to judge you. They're going to sit there and be broadly supportive. And you still walk out there, and suddenly the gremlin reaches out from stage left and grabs your throat, and you can't talk.
Yeah. But one of those early conversations I had with them, and I was reflecting personally, but also on behalf of what I thought the audience might be thinking at this point was, surely you guys can't be scared of this stuff. Look at what you've achieved. And they both said, but I am scared of this stuff. So yeah, that was the big challenge. There were a few, if I reflect on the journey that they both went on, There were some technical things that I could help them out with in terms of their speaking and presentations and everything. But really, the big challenge was just to help them with what goes on between their ears.
And having a plan B.
Yeah. Oh, yeah,
And
absolutely. It's
having a
very,
plan B.
very useful, isn't it?
The technical stuff that Simon helped them with is to make sure a few things didn't work.
Well, that was Tony's to this day. I think still thinks I planned that in, but genuinely, I had no idea that we'd turn up and there wouldn't be any audio visual assistance for him,
Yeah.
or that Nick's would fail on him. But it was really useful. I told them both actually. It was sort of back end of July, so a few months ago. I did 2 paid speaking gigs within the same week, and for both of them, I turned up with a laptop and PowerPoint and videos and all that sort of stuff. And on both occasions, I couldn't use them. There was no AV support in one of them, and we were in a room that it was the hottest day of the summer. The air conditioning had failed, so we were all, it was sweltering in there. And in order to move rooms to an air conditioned room, the new room had no AV. So on both occasions, I was in that position myself, and I was sort of thinking back to the advice I'd given them, thinking, okay, it's time to take some of that yourself now, kid. This is time for your plan B.
I wish I'm sure you had. For those who haven't watched the series, please go to Be World Class and follow the links through to This Is Mental. It's
We have
really
we have a dedicated URL. Thisismental.tv will take you directly there.
and we'll put it in the show notes below here, folks. So we'll have show notes. We'll have show notes that will have Be World Class, and also the link to the series as well. This is Mental series and the book. So worry not, it's all down here. Simon, the other standout. So we were talking about the power of persistence and people getting the ear of people of influence by basically being persistent. The other thing is the power of the meme, which I think is something that is really insightful and perhaps would again come from stage left. Could you walk us through that? Because I think our dear viewer and listener would find that more than interesting.
Yeah. I mean, I was looking at how these people sort of go viral, quote unquote, how they get other people to transmit their messages and share their messages. And one way they do it is to create a really, really memorable little package for people and put something, an idea into such a succinct form. It's almost like I couldn't have said that any better myself, so I'll just use their words.
Yeah.
And it's often something that sometimes it has an irony to it. It's one of those phrases that's got a little twist in it, which makes it memorable, which makes it sticky for us. And we think, well, I couldn't have said that any better, so I'll just use their words. And in doing so, because they can package it in that way, you are literally passing their words on to somebody else. If you think about virality, that's really what it is. Somebody else wants to share that message. They have to want to, but it's got to be in such a nice, simple, easy package that translating it's easier than trying to communicate that myself or kind of put my own spin on it. I'll just use theirs.
Like it starts with why.
Yeah, absolutely.
Simon Sinek, a genius concept, and a lot of people. I mean, even when I talk to other people about Simon Sinek, it starts with why. It always comes up. It's sticky. How many years? 15 years later, I think.
Yeah.
The power of, but expand upon it, because it's quite an important section in the book, I think, isn't it? And it goes back.
Yeah, it does. And if you understand first of all the essence of virality, and I really picked this up from Airbnb co-founder Joe Gebbia, who before Airbnb had invented a little product called Crit Buns. So he was a design student, and he'd come to realize that part of life as a design student is you sit in critical analysis sessions, where people will offer each other, I think, critical, maybe constructive feedback on each other's work. But it involves a lot of time sitting on hard benches, usually covered in dust. And he said at the end of these, everybody would sort of get up, and these are sort of young students, get up, holding their buttocks because they're so sore, leaving prints in the dust on the bench, walking away with prints on their trousers or skirts or whatever as they walked away. And he was thinking, there's got to be a better way to do this. So he invented a little cushion in the shape of two buttocks called crit buns, and you could take those into your sessions. And he started marketing them. You know, he's a design student. He had them made into a product. And he said I think it was in an exhibition in Japan that he first noticed this. So he's selling his crit buns, but on the bottom of the product, he's written the story of how they were created. And he tells the story to the first person in the queue. And as he's doing that, and he starts asking them about how they would use it, because maybe they're not a design student, but maybe they'd find use for it. And he noticed that the first person in the queue was telling the story to the second person in the queue. And they, in turn, tell the story to the third person in the queue. This thing's got virality. People are sharing it, not because he asked them to, of their own volition. They're sharing the story because he's created it in a form that they can do that. And memes are just a very, very short version of this. It's a phrase rather than a whole story. And to package something in that way makes it super, super powerful.
But it's a phrase that tells a story, isn't it? It's
Yeah,
it's a
absolutely.
that conveys it really succinctly.
That's right. It's got a nice complete idea wrapped into it, one that you could then expand on, but it's in such a nice, neat form. I mean, one of mine, it was one that I realized I said, and then I thought, oh, that's quite neat. Giving up is not the result of failure; it's the cause. And that was one that I shared it with somebody, and I found that they were sharing it with other people, etc., etc. But another one that I reflected on, and I've had a couple of these drawn up into to little sort of cartoon images, and I've got myself doing the sort of the Socrates pose on this one. I fail, therefore I am.
Yeah,
And it was
brilliant.
obviously a take on Rene Descartes' I think, therefore I am. But I was thinking, well, everybody fails. To fail is to be human. And Rene Descartes was trying to say that to think is to be human. That's how we know that we exist, because we think. And I'm thinking, well, I know that I'm human because I fail all the time, because that's what human beings do. So I fail, therefore I am. And Louise, who does all of our graphic design work, drew that up as a little meme. That one also seems to travel.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can see why. And of course, as we discussed, failure is the foundation of success.
Absolutely.
And it really does resonate with people. And I have to say that what you've just described there in terms of a short phrase that captures a big story would be well translated to organizations' corporate mission statements and vision statements. Something that I find when you're sitting down with a client and you're starting to work through a strategy and they're diving off for the first analysis, and you go, well, hang about it. I'm an ex-pilot. Shouldn't we decide what the destination is first?
Yeah.
You know, because analyzing where we're going. It's very interesting, particularly when you have founders and you say, okay, what's your vision for this? Long pause, lots of thought. Can I come back to you? Go, let's work through it. Let's tease this out.
Yeah.
Because as a sports psychologist, you'll be familiar with the story of where you send 6 balls at people and they don't catch any of them, or maybe one, or you throw them 2 balls and they catch both of them. In terms of effective messaging. And I think what you've described in terms of memes is exactly that. How do you create a vision and mission statement that really is viral? Because it's capturing the imagination and the emotions of the people who are receiving it. Is there a formula, or is it just a bit of luck?
I think you can play around with this. You know, I think what I've tended to find personally is that there's an idea there that probably, to start with, I'll communicate it in 3 or 4 sentences and it won't be particularly eloquent. But gradually over time, I'll refine that down and refine that down. And I find that actually writing and speaking go hand in hand. So I try and write it in a form that's easy for the reader, easy to digest, memorable. And that then I might develop and generate phrases that I then use in my speaking work. Equally, when I'm speaking, it needs to be in a very memorable, sort of high impact form. So lots of those phrases end up sort of finding their way into the books.
And that's where you pointed out that a big differentiator here are the people who've actually not only gone online and got the data back, but actually have stood in front of an audience and have found out what actually works and what doesn't work through audience feedback, how important that is. And I think Tony Robbins is one of those, isn't he?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think over time, it's a case of continually refining down, and then you'll probably find something that really does stick. And you can see it in people's reactions. You can see it in the way that those light bulbs go on in their heads, or you see that aha moment in people, or you just see the fact that they've started sharing it in the way that you shared it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, fascinating. I was interested in the when you got to the chapter that said, "Well, that's it. I've covered it. I've covered the key to the door. All that's needed." You go, "No, I'm only halfway through the book. What else is here?" And of course, I went on. It was fascinating. And in fact, as we're getting short of time now, but what is, if you were to crystallize the key messaging from Key to the Door, which incidentally, dear listener and viewer, is a must-read, must-buy book. Carry it with you everywhere. It's only just over 90 pages, and is like a field guide. Take it with you everywhere. If you're going to be summarizing that, Simon, what would it be? What, as we hand the gift to the listener and viewer who's stayed with us this far, what would it be?
So I think what all of these historic global thought leaders have got in common is that they've unlocked their understanding. That's why the book's called Key to the Door. They've unlocked our understanding through a really simple idea. And I describe it as, it's something, it's new, but it's not new. It's something that's been there, but we haven't really been able to access. It's an understanding that's been just out of reach. So they haven't conjured up something out of nowhere, but they've given us the key that's unlocked this door, this little simple idea. And it's usually because they're using some new language to help us get there. And by unlocking this door, we now go, yeah, I get it now.
Okay.
And that's the real magic of it. It's not that it's so profound, so epic that we hadn't even considered it before. It's been there, just on the edge of our understanding. And as Brené Brown describes it, she said, psychological safety had been written about in pretty much every Harvard Business Review article for the previous 15 years, but vulnerability is the key to the door. It helps us unlock that understanding, make it real. Simon Sinek will say the same about purpose. He said, purpose was one of these kind of almost like hippie, whimsical things talked about in business, but start with why gave people the language to understand it all and to be able to do something with it.
And the great foundations from our conversation, the book itself, appears to be persistence and refining the message. Is that fair?
Yeah. It's simplicity is not easy. And when I talk to people about simplifying things and putting them into such a condensed, crystallized form that people can actually access it, that takes time and effort. Yeah. It's easy to create waffle. It's easy to create complexity. It's very, very difficult to create something that's absolutely crystal clear. And I suspect, if you wanted to visualize that in some way, if you imagine how diamonds are created, we start off with a lot of carbon that after millions of years becomes a piece of coal. But even that's not a diamond. We've got to refine it. We've got to squash it, pressurize it, heat it, et cetera, for a long time to get it to a point where it's a diamond. And that's the same with these ideas.
Yeah. I mean, it's such a great book, and it, I think, gives people simplicity conceptually, and it gives them the hope and the realization that the people who have been these world-class thought leaders haven't done it overnight. It's required a great deal of persistence, a great deal of simplicity. And I can't tell you how many times people have referred to the two great lengths analogy reality that you created in our last podcast for actually working out what the jobs are that you need to do to simplify it, the 5 things that simplify. So fascinating, Simon. A great read, a great book. Thank you for coming on again. This will be inspiring to people, I know, because it's inspired me when I read it. So Simon Hartley, the man who coaches the great Bayern Munich, Adidas, and others. I'm really grateful for you taking the time to join us today, and we look forward to seeing you again on a Just Great People podcast very, very soon, Simon. Thank you.
Thank you. My pleasure.
We do hope you've enjoyed listening and watching our podcast. If you'd like to join us on our primer for business growth, please just follow the QR code or the links in the notes to this podcast. Many thanks. So that's it for today's Just Great People podcast from the Success Consultancy. We hope and trust you've enjoyed it. Please join us next time, and please do remember to subscribe. Thanks for joining us.